What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Pick Six Podcast. I'm Katie Mox, joined here with Will Brinson and Brady Quinn. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe on the YouTube page. Rate and review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. For those of you, Team Brooks up there. For those of you who missed the last episode, we played a game of Would You Rather with odds for Offensive Player of the Year, rushing touchdown totals, and total passing yards with our friend JLC. Today, we're going to discuss lines pertaining to some free agent landing spots and the odds of those teams' postseason chances. Now let's chatter. Getting myself mixed up there on Liv and the PGA
So actually,
Tour.
this Team Brooks shirt is actually a Team Brooks versus Team Bryson shirt that I got a long time ago, right? So it was about like Brooks versus Bryson, but now it's applicable because it's Brooks versus Jay Moynihan and the PGA Tour, who just went complete heel turn after years of. So like all these guys left for Liv, they take all their money, they get criticized, they're blasted in the media for taking the Saudi money, and Brady then the PGA Tour, without telling any of its members, turns around and takes even more money from the PIF, the Public International Fund, which is a great name. It's like the human fund on Seinfeld. It's like just a big pile of billions of Saudi dollars. It's a PIF.
Yeah, I mean, it's
catch me up on this. Sorry,
yes,
wait, and then Brady, catch me. Yeah,
basically, what, a year, 6 months ago, the Liv Tour was created, and it's an alternative, obviously, to the PGA Tour, backed by a Saudi sovereign fund. And obviously, there is a ton of difficult conversations to be had that tie back to 9/11 and Saudi Arabia's ties to 9/11. So you had a number of professional golfers who were lured away by 8 to 9 figures in guarantees of money to play in a style of golf that it's less golf. It's a little more lively and fun, I guess you'd say.
You wear shorts.
Atmosphere. You can wear shorts, as Will points out, which is probably the least significant thing of all of it. More team, games and so forth. But that was essentially what happened. Is a Saudi-backed golf league came and poached some of the best players, or at least some of the biggest names, but some of the best players as well, from the PGA Tour. And so there was a battle for quite some time. A lot of different narratives were kind of thrown out there, and you've now got the PGA Tour pulling a 180 from where it was 6 months to a year ago. And I think you could see this coming for people who've been around the game of golf. You've heard kind of Rory McIlroy, who was really the ambassador for the PGA Tour, if you will, during that period of time. And one of the biggest names who probably could have gotten 9 figures from the Liv Tour that didn't, and instead decided to stay and was outspoken, but sort of started to soften his tone in that regard. And I wonder how guys like him are feeling right now, because they didn't take the payday. They were able to hold strong. They supported the PGA Tour and they needed him to the most. And then you have Jay Monahan go ahead and sit there and completely, without telling any of the tour players, that they're now merging, or there's going to be some sort of world where both of these leagues exist and are copacetic. So there's a lot to still dive into it. It does lead me to, because this isn't a golf podcast, even though I'm sure Will would love to talk about Team Brooks and all that. Although I'm sure Phil Mickelson, I'm sure Phil Mickelson and Greg Norman have a lot to say too. But I wonder if this could ever happen to the NFL. I mean, we look at the NFL and it's the biggest, greatest in American sports. Obviously people, outside of the U.S. would say that football in their minds, or soccer, would rival it. But I do wonder if something like this couldn't start up and potentially lure away with tons of money to get football players to go play, whether it's internationally or even just globally, and put together some sort of bigger idea like that. You'd have to think there'd be interest. You'd have to think there'd be intrigue, and you'd have to think that given how short the lifespans are of an NFL or professional football player, that they'd be willing to take that bag and leave the NFL if that was the case. So
and look, I know, Brady, you are a man of high moral.
For the whole football game plan guy, we're not talking about spring leagues, pal. We're talking about something much, much bigger. We're talking about a league that's going to be constructed, that's going to be backed by billions and billions of dollars that would lure a lot of these players away.
So a couple NFL related
football game plan might be our friend Emery Hunt, by the way.
It might be.
Yeah.
Maybe so. I don't know.
It is.
Anyway, he's Brady's pal, apparently. A couple of things. One, the idea that the Saudis would get into football makes total sense. I mean, they came after the PGA Tour. Like, the reason why they're all heavily involved in F1, which is insanely popular. The reason that nobody got their arms up in the air is because you don't have this channel dedicated to feeding like middle-aged Americans golf info all the time. And Brandel Chambliss up there like, hey, how dare they? And it's like, hey, Brandel, guess what? You're now owned by the Saudis. Two, I think there's an angle here that isn't talked about enough, in that the PGA Tour mentioned that they will retain their, I believe it's 501c3 and not 501c6. I thought I saw a 6 in it. Did I catch a 9er in there? I think it's 501c3.
Walkie-talkie?
Exactly. Anybody who hadn't seen Tommy Boy is a terrible person, I think.
Katie, have you seen Tommy Boy?
I've seen Tommy Boy no less than 30 times. So yes.
That's right. Good. You're a good person. There you go.
Here's the real question. Have you seen Black Sheep?
Maybe once.
It's the cousin of Tommy Boy, essentially. Yeah. But
Wow.
the PGA Tour
I will get right on that.
The PGA Tour is in litigation with the Liv
Tour.
We were about to get to the discovery portion of it, and there was going to be a lot of talk about their 501c3 status. I would not be surprised. I'm just pure conjecture here. I would not be surprised at all if the NFL and the NBA, who both still have 501c3 status, called the PGA Tour and Jay Monahan and said, "Hey, buddy, you screw this up and we will have you like ousted. Like, you cannot screw this up for every sports league in the country. Figure it out." And then three, of course, if the Saudis decided to come to and take over football and start their own football league, somebody like Brady Quinn, a high-minded, rigid moral individual, is not going to leave American broadcast to cover it. But hey, you know who will? For that cash, for that sweet, sweet cash, this guy, his two thumbs and will cover anything you want for cash. This guy.
First off, let's not go that far. But for people out there who don't think this is a possibility,
this definitely is.
Well, let me just go back to the year when I was playing the NFL. We had a lockout. We had stored away cash to prepare for not being paid, even just our off season, like the per diem we were getting during that portion of the week. And for some guys, they had bonuses. For some guys, they were just getting paid, I think, $1,000 a week or whatever the number is at that point in time. This dates back to 2011. Guys could not budget and could not make it through. They couldn't. Like, they needed to be able to get back to playing football in order to be able to make money. And so if you don't think that, even if someone just said, hey, by the way, we're going to start a league and your contract's going to be guaranteed, fully guaranteed. If you don't think guys would be like, yeah, I'll go ahead and take that opportunity to go there, you're out of your minds. I mean, the majority of players in the league play for the generational wealth that you can create from that. It's not for the love of the game. It's not for everything else that comes along with it. So if I was the NFL right now, I think that the worst thing you can do is feel complacent about where you're at. And there's no doubt they're sitting on the mountaintop of all professional sports in this country. But that doesn't mean that there's not someone out there lurking that could come in with a lot of money and figure out a way of eating things up or bringing competition in right away. I mean, think about the way, taxis, for example, changed with the invention of Uber.
Yeah.
We never thought about that, right? You get off the plane, you're like, all right, where's a taxi? I gotta get in line, I gotta go. Now everyone just gets on their phone.
Right, or taxis are like there and ready and like helping you load stuff in, and they're clean and neat. It's capitalism.
It's how capitalism works. There's a lot of other names for it. You could call it entrepreneurialism. You could call it
free market.
Sure. And that's
I've taken economics too, Brady. I know you're in business school, but I've taken economics.
I get it. You got your team.
College for a very long time. We know.
Voodoo economics.
But the point is for those people out there who think like, oh, there's too many players. You're talking about almost 2,000 players. Yeah, but you're also talking about players who'd be willing to jump ship for a 3-year fully guaranteed deal for a lot less money than what you're paying at one of these top PGA Tour golf players for.
Yep.
You're talking about guys who'd say, all right, I'll go over and play over there for 3 years. If you're willing to guarantee, 3-4 year contract that might be worth $2, $3, $4 million. Even those players would be willing to take that leap and go over and do that, especially when the average lifespan of an NFL player is 3 years, 3.5 years. So, this is a football podcast, but we're talking about it because it could have greater ramifications in the future if people aren't careful, if they don't follow this and see where it leads.
And the reason why that this hasn't happened sooner with maybe the NFL is that the NFL, Roger Goodell and the NFL owners have been proactive about saying, no. We are going to make sure that we have if the league is a fort, if the league is a castle, they have made sure to build a moat and to build a fence and to keep their defenses up. And the PGA Tour, frankly, was so arrogant and complacent about protecting their league and just assumed that these guys wouldn't leave for the millions of dollars, which is silly. Like if you're telling me like Aaron Rodgers is, let's see, 2 years left on his deal. Let's say he's a free agent after 2 years and he's basically done. I'm not saying he would do it, but like that's the example of like the Brooks Koepka or the Dustin Johnson style, the older, still superstar player who might take $120 million guaranteed to go play over there for 2 years.
Oh, Lamar Jackson. He wanted a fully guaranteed deal. He just went through that, right? Didn't get that fully guaranteed deal. It was a good deal. It wasn't fully guaranteed. He wanted to surpass Watson. Why was if someone presented them that opportunity? He's an electric player. He's a ton of fun to watch, a former league MVP. You could throw Patrick Mahomes, any of the quarterbacks that right now have created this league. And you might say, and by the way, in this scenario, obviously it's a Saudi-backed league we're talking about in regards to Liv Golf and the PGA Tour. It doesn't necessarily have to be a Saudi-backed, fund that's going to end up supporting this. It could be anyone that puts enough money together.
I mean, Jeff Bezos is like, you won't let me buy a team? Fine, I'll do my own league.
Which is, I mean, it's possible if you think about it, given how much money he has, if he really want to put his time and energy into that. But again,
he's too busy droning packages to everybody in America.
Well, that and then
we saw it with soccer too, with some of the soccer stars over in Europe, like David Beckham came and played for LA just for a paycheck after he was towards the end of his career.
Yeah, and I think that like segues into like a later conversation that we kind of had scheduled today for like a guy like DeAndre Hopkins, where there's this thought that, I mean, I don't know if you want to segue into it now or wait till later, but I guess the natural discussion point is everyone seems to think that, players at that point, because he's the type of guy that could be considered probably for the Hall of Fame. I think when you look at that 4-year stretch, 5-year stretch, arguably one of the best wide receivers in the league, if not the best, right? And then they get to this point in their career where you're saying, okay, they don't have many more years left. What are they looking for? Are they looking for rings? They're looking for a championship. The mindset of an NFL player is one that you have to have the utmost confidence where, believe it or not, every single player out there feels like when they go to that team, when they go to that roster, that team's got a better chance of winning a Super Bowl. That's just how you're wired. Like you wouldn't make it into the NFL if you didn't have that sort of self-confidence. And in the case of Hopkins, like you could sit there and say, well, maybe he's looking to be on a Super Bowl contender, or maybe he's just looking for the best contract. Like sometimes it just comes down to saying like, I just want to maximize my window of time in this game to make as much money as humanly possible because I know I'm not going to make as much once I get out. The odds are against that happening. Most NFL players, they make the most money in their career here, and it goes straight down from there because that's just the reality of being able to be blessed enough to play in a professional sports league. So I do think it's going to be interesting to see where he ends up, only because everyone seems to think it's like, oh, it's the Bills, the Chiefs. Those are like the betting favorites. And well, you've got some people and coaches who've talked publicly about, we feel good about where we're at right now. And maybe they do, and maybe they can sign him later on. But I also feel like from his side of things, he might be saying like, I'm still trying to go get the biggest contract I can. At one point I was the highest paid wide receiver. I still feel like I should be in this league right now.
People in the chat were trying to say like he had signed and was doing a Texans reunion. Do you think that the guys like we all have Google and
that? No, yeah,
we have Google and Twitter alerts if like DeAndre Hopkins gets signed, and I'm sure Billy will let us know if DeAndre Hopkins gets signed somewhere.
Well, let me just say this for all the people in the chat that I'm not reading their comments on that, but I don't. So if it does happen, let me know because I will be completely.
We'll let you know, Brady.
I've prepared up to 2 p.m. Eastern time. After that, like I am locked in with you guys here. So I'm not looking at anything else. I'm just engaged in our conversation.
I believe just yesterday, like Brandon Beam was on Pat McAfee's show, said I would never rule out D-Hop coming here, but I know he's a great player and will demand a great contract. Or a decent contract, excuse me. That's a great way to put it because what he's saying is, look, we're the Bills. We'd love to have DeAndre Hopkins. We have good players. DeAndre Hopkins would make us better. He's a good wide receiver, even if some people have claimed that he might be a little overrated. me. I'm not alone there. Yeah, there you go. And that's right. It's hard to point on StreamYard. Yeah, they get it. But that's the thing is like DeAndre Hopkins is not going to go and play for the Bills or the Chiefs on some podunk deal just to try to win a contract. He wants to win his money. He lost 6 weeks of pay last year because of PED suspensions.
Allegedly. Allegedly.
Oh, that's why he lost it.
Well, I mean, that's what they're claiming. I'm just saying, like, you never know, man.
Well, he allegedly did PEDs. He was suspended.
It could be like the Bob Baffert situation where maybe he had something in his food that was contaminated by someone who was preparing the food. I don't know. I'm just saying, like, you don't remember that all what happened after the Derby?
Remember when Dabo Sweeney had all those guys for Clemson that got suspended from the playoffs? He's like, I mean, it could have been in Coca-Cola. That stuff's manufactured in China. Who the hell knows where you get these testosterone pills in there? That's crazy.
That's what I'm saying. So they'll go throwing that around, all right? Allegedly.
Yeah, but I think D-Hop is a guy who's gonna probably end up chasing cash before he chases a ring, so to speak. Maybe the Chiefs are a little bit different. I'm not so sure. I mean, the Chiefs, it makes sense. We talked about this with JLC, or we talked about it with Brady last week. I can't remember. It all bleeds together at this point. But like, yeah, the Chiefs make sense because they're awesome. They're also really good with the offensive setup they had last year, where they didn't have to funnel it through an alpha wide receiver. And would he be willing to go to the Chiefs and see less targets and to be less of a true number one? I mean, that's a tough question for a guy like D-Hop.
I'm gonna throw this first to Katie, and then Will, you can chime in because you take up a lot of time talking here. So
it's what I'm supposed to do.
If D-Hop was a free agent, and let's go back, let's say a few months, did the Ravens sign D-Hop or Odell Beckham?
Oh, wow. I think there's more of an upside with D-Hop. Yes, he had the 6-game suspension, but he has been playing more than OBJ has. We don't know what exactly we're going to get from OBJ. So I would say I would rather have D-Hop than Odell Beckham Jr. if I were the Ravens.
I think that the Ravens would be more likely to sign Hopkins than Odell Beckham.
I mean, I would think from like talent and ability wise, yeah, D-Hop makes more sense. I would say even by and large throughout the course of his career. There's obviously injury concerns too with Odell. Even though, again, I think he's very capable of being a stud. He's got to get healthy, get back in the field to do it. But it is kind of interesting that, you think about just the timing of Arizona and even just like trading. Like you wonder if they couldn't have moved on sooner had they tried to trade before the draft. And just the way this was all worked out, I think you'd have to look at the Arizona Cardinals so far and feel like they kind of fumbled this, right? I mean, am I wrong in saying that the fact that he's become a free agent, and I understand that they tried to trade him, they're going to get the offer they wanted, so they released him. But you would have thought that maybe you had a little better offer with the timing of it was better, either before free agency, before the draft, instead of waiting so long.
I would love to see D-Hop with Lamar Jackson. I think that would just be an electric duo. And yeah, we don't know what we're going to get with OBJ. And, D-Hop gave those 3 things that he wanted from a team. And I do think that the Ravens fit that bill pretty well. Quarterback that loves the game, a franchise that, is well-liked and well-respected.
What was the third thing?
The third thing was
front office.
Front off. Well, no, that already said that one.
Ownership,
Front office,
ownership.
Ownership. Yeah. Which
Wait, what do you you got that coy voice you got going where you're thinking
I was thinking about like the 3 things. I was like,
the 3 pillars of DeAndre Hopkins.
Or whatever he said.
I'm interested that because I know when OBJ was in the first sweepstakes, right? When he went to the Rams, it was very important to him to win a ring. He wanted to go somewhere that he could win. And it's interesting that you guys feel that D-Hop is more interested in money necessarily than going a place where he can win, because he is.
I never said that.
I said that.
Okay. Well, I felt like the vibe of maybe it was Brinson that said that Brinson, you did say that he's more likely to get a paycheck than a ring.
Brady was noting that people are more likely to this is just generally true. And it goes back to the PGA Live stuff. Like people like money You're not guaranteed. You're only guaranteed so many bites of the apple, particularly in the NFL. And NFL players and athletes are trained. Remember D. Milner said he was the best cornerback in the NFL one time? Like, that's how you have to believe. And so, like, when you think that way, you have to look for the best, the biggest amount of money.
I think the worst question that media members ask players are like, do you think you're the best? Do you think you should be starting? It's like, yeah, dude, how do you think this guy got here? Okay. Like, imagine like all the nights that you're like out alone, like throwing a football through a tire in the dark or something while it spins or into a net. Like, you think about all the things that you did like way back just to get to that point. And you're like, yeah, of course I believe that because I believed in myself before anyone else did. So yes, like, and that's where I think it just comes in and blends the conversation of, for people who think that a player is going to sign with a team that we see on the outside as a Super Bowl contender, you're wrong, because they think a lot of times that when they get to that team, like, you are now a Super Bowl contender because I'm here. And then they're going to justify, that's how they kind of rationalize and justify it in their head, even though they're also probably getting a little bit more money too to be at that particular team. That's how players think. Like, that's how players think. So
is that how you felt when you got to the Broncos?
Every time you're with the team, you feel that way. You're like, put me in, you know, I'll win this thing. Like, that's the mentality you have to have. Now, whether people want to tell you you're wrong and all that, those are a lot of the bums who are sitting on the couch at home who've never even been in the arena before. And that's what I'm saying. It's fine to have that opinion, but the reality is they'll never, ever be able to achieve what you were able to achieve because you had to think different than they did. Like, that's part of the reason. Like, all these guys think different. So, you know, when people are like, oh, he wants to go chase a ring, it's like, no, he probably thinks he's going to help bring a ring wherever he goes. And that's why a lot of times, like, yeah, it's a better contract, but they also have extreme confidence in their own abilities.
Meanwhile, there's Pete Prisco would pawn a Super Bowl ring for $75, like just because he is money over championships. He's always said that.
All right, yes. So Billy putting the topic bar there. Where do you think D Hop will land, Brady?
Oh gosh,
not the Ravens now, I guess.
Yeah, no. I mean, the Ravens don't really make sense, right? I mean, I don't know. I mean, like, I keep thinking about the Browns, and I'm like, where are they in this whole equation? Like, you've got pressure on Kevin Stefanski, where I feel like they've got to win this year, and he's got chemistry with Watson from the time together in Houston. You put him on that offense, and even though I do feel like Stefanski's more of a run-first kind of guy, I look at it and I go, that would make a lot of sense for like a lot of different reasons. And they're also not a team that a lot of people are talking about, but they have made splashy moves before. They did go for Odell Beckham and bring him to Cleveland. So I think on a short-term deal, it makes a lot of sense. That would be a team that I think could make a run for him. And then, not necessarily, they're not the Bills, not the Chiefs, not what everyone's talking about, but try to be a part of that conversation, being a contender. I think this is a huge year for Cleveland, even just evaluating Watson and what they have in him. So why not supply him every single potential great wide receiver he can get?
Browns also have almost $15 million in salary cap space, which means you could really easily do a 1 to 2 year deal where you put something together. Texans, Cowboys have kind of ruled it out.
And Brady's excited.
Yeah, there you go. Trying to think who else has significant cap space. There's a lot of teams that have north of $10 million. So it wouldn't be that.
Can I teach you the cap trick that you do when you're a team that doesn't have a lot of cap space?
Void years.
You can void years, but who are you going to do that with there, Willie Brinson? Are you going to do it with the player signing? Sure. You can also restructure your quarterback when you feel really good. Your quarterback is your mortgage company. All right. That's who you go to when you need to refinance. Go to Joe Burrow. Go to Josh Allen. Go to Patrick Mahomes. Go to Lamar Jackson. All these guys. Now, Jackson's a little tougher. You just sign him to a deal. But any of those guys who are under contract already, Burrow hasn't gotten his yet. Makes it a little more difficult. But the guys who are under contract, go ahead and restructure theirs, and that's how you're going to create more of that cap space too.
Yeah, you can't restructure Lamar in the same offseason that you signed him to a new deal, I believe, by CBA. Yeah. Well, you said it would be a little bit tougher. It'd actually be impossible.
It'd be impossible. Yeah, it wouldn't do that.
It would be illegal. It would be a violation of CBA rules.
You wouldn't do it anyway. You wouldn't go, we're going to redo this now after we just did.
Look who knows more about the CBA. Is it Brinson or Brady? The other thing, too, is that a lot of these quarterback contracts have automatic, the player doesn't have to approve it anymore. You can alert them that you're restructuring because they're getting cash. So anyway, not to get in the weeds on that, I'm sure we could talk about something else like soccer.
We can. We are going to take a quick break. Obviously, we just talked about D-Hop, but there is another Pro Bowler that is, doesn't quite have a home yet. We're going to talk about that next. But before we take a break, Saturday on CBS, one of the most celebrated soccer tournaments in the world is down to just two clubs. Manchester City meets Inter in the Champions League final. Our world-class team will be on the pitch with live coverage beginning Saturday at 1:30 Eastern on CBS. You're watching Pick Six. We'll be right back.
They say patience is a virtue. But for some things, we can't wait.
Welcome back to Pick Six, here with Brady Quinn and Will Brinson. We talked about D-Hop, but Dalvin Cook also is still on the Vikings, has yet to be released. Why do you think this is, Brady?
I don't know. Maybe they're thinking about keeping him and having Alexander Madison in the backfield at the same time. Maybe you're rethinking how this is all going to work out. I mean, we're past June 1. Usually you make a release like that, a post June 1 designation. Maybe they're waiting to see if there's some injuries where a team might need a player of Dalvin Cook's caliber. It's tough to tell. I mean, I really don't have a reason for it. He's a great player, especially when healthy. You look at like Dallas and Chicago, the Chargers, all teams who I think could potentially use them. Now, I mean, I know Eckler's with the Chargers, but you'd have to think, I believe he's on his last year of his deal. If that's not right, Will. And so you probably look at trying to bring someone in who could replace him for a couple of years, provide more balance there. And I think he fits their scheme, but it's a tough call. These are always the most interesting to me because usually you see the older veteran guys become released. You get this dead period of time, and they come in like a week or two before the season actually starts. Hit their
Hopkins.
Hopkins, amongst others.
I mean, it's bizarre. There was a big piece from Kevin Seifert at ESPN, I think, who wrote about this, just sort of kind of taking all the stuff, and he lives around or near Minnesota, taking all the stuff and sort of combining it and saying, like, what's the deal? And it's like very clear that the Vikings have made it. I think the Vikings are hoping that Dalvin will be willing to take a pay cut. I think that's got to be it at this point, because otherwise, why would you not cut him and free up the cap space when you've attempted? You did the thing where you're like, he was on the trade block, rumored to be on the trade block, and then you just straight up said like let it leak out that you're going to cut him as a June 1st guy, and which meant that you had that last second rush where we talked about this, where people might try and make a move for him for a late round pick. That didn't happen. So now I think, and the other thing too, the GM there has been pretty adamant about trying to get even quote incremental wins, like a 5th round pick, a 6th round pick for guys like that. So they may be hoping to either get Dalvin to take a pay cut or to get just a bare bones minimum deal from him if a running back gets hurt in OTAs or training camp.
It's good theory.
Sim in the chat says, I'd be interested to hear what Brady makes of the Bills' move for Floyd. We're glad that you asked. So the Bills have signed defensive end Leonard Floyd, former first-round pick, to bolster their pass rush. ESPN Jeremy Fowler reported Floyd is getting 1 year, $7 million fully guaranteed incentives for 8, 10, 12 sacks that could increase the total value to $9 million. Obviously, they've got Von Miller coming off of the ACL tear, which I believe happened on Thanksgiving. What does this mean for the Bills and how they feel about possibly Von Miller coming back?
I think maybe gives you a little bit of an indication of where Von's at in his recovery and how fast he'll be able to make it back. I don't think you want to throw him right in week 1 and have him go out there and play every defensive snap possible. So you get an experienced edge rusher, a guy with some upside and ability. He's incentivized too based on the contract, which good for him. It's a good contract. But I also feel like, do they really need edge pressure help? I mean, maybe the absence of Von Miller exposed some of that last year. And so it makes some sense. Even when Von comes back healthy, you get a guy like Leonard Floyd who can mix in that group, but they've drafted there oftentimes. They've got a lot of depth there. I thought they'd maybe, need a little more help in the interior of their D-line to be a little more stout based on how their season ended last year. But it's one where, look, the Bills are trying all they can, I think, to load up to make sure if you want to go win the AFC, you have to go through Kansas City. I know that may pain a lot of Bills fans to hear, but that's just the track record since Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid have been there. So you got to have the edge rushers, pass rushers to be able to affect him. When Miller comes out, Floyd goes in. You got to have that sort of kind of rotation where there's always someone who's constantly putting pressure on Patrick Mahomes. And if you could do it with 4, as opposed to having to bring additional pressure. It frees you up to play a more variety of coverages and different things that you can do in the back end to try to confuse and slow down and maybe get Patrick Mahomes to throw you a few, let alone, anyone else that you got to face in the AFC, by the way. I shouldn't just talk about Patrick Mahomes. I mean, Joe Burrow, now Aaron Rodgers, Tua, whoever else you want to talk about.
Twice on those the last two guys, yeah.
Right.
I think it's interesting to note, if you go back and look at Von Miller's snap count from 2022, so they beat the Rams 31-10, and that's his revenge game against his old team that he just won the Super Bowl with. He only played 52% of the snaps. You beat the Titans the next week 41-7. He only played 50% of the snaps. You beat the Steelers 38-3 in week 5, 49% of the snaps. And then other than the game where he was injured, he was north of 70%. Excuse me, he played 61% against the Ravens as well, but like north of 60%, north of 70% in all but that one other game. And the point being is that it's very clear that the Bills, when they signed him last year, wanted to try to manage his snap count and not waste, not burn through defensive snaps when they're up, big, when the game's a blowout. Like Von Miller is one of the first guys they're going to get out of there when they can. They beat Kansas City in Arrowhead with Von Miller, who had 2 sacks and played 78% of the snaps. They know that they can win against the Chiefs with Von Miller and that he impacts them that much. So to me, the Leonard Floyd sighting is basically about trying to flip last year's season and say, Von, we are not going to, absolutely ramp him up. If you have to, he doesn't even play early. I think when he's ready to play, he will, but they will not get him out there playing full games early in the season and burn through those snaps given his age would be my guess. Leonard Floyd is a pure ramp up play for Von Miller.
I also think when you look through the years, I mean, think about all the draft capital that they've spent on their defensive line or even signings. I mean, you go back to 2021, they got Greg Rousseau, Ed Oliver in 2019 as a D tackle.
Who they just signed to an extension?
Yep. Shaq Lawson, 2016, a first-round pick. Boogie Basham, a second-round pick in 2021. AJ Epinesa, second-round pick in 2020. Now they've got a former first-round pick, Leonard Floyd. Really interesting free agent signing. A former first-round pick in Shane Ray, if that name rings a bell. It's time the Denver Broncos. I mean, they do not stop trying to build that defensive front to be an absolute nightmare for opposing quarterbacks. I love the strategy. I love the style that Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott have kind of keyed in on here. And I hate to give him credit, but you have to give Pete Prisco credit in this case because it's exactly how he would try to build a defense if you're the general manager. You pay all the guys up front and the guys in your back end, and that's where your primary focus is. And so I feel bad for obviously the off-the-ball linebackers, but hence the reason why a guy like Edmonds isn't there anymore. Obviously a high draft pick, really good player, but they just don't see value in those positions quite as much as they do the D line and the pass rush, and obviously the secondary as well.
Yep. I mean, they weren't great against the run for a few years. They loaded up on it, and they know they need to get pass rush against. This is the quintessential NFL roster building based entirely on one other person. You saw it for years in the AFC East with Tom Brady, and now it's like people will spin because Patrick Mahomes exists.
I think here's the compliment to the Bills is when you make a draft, like I don't care which round you're talking about, not one draft pick will be in the starting lineup this year for them. Maybe you'd say Dalton Kincaid if they're going to play 12 personnel, but that's it. Like he's the first round pick, but that's it. So they have such a well-built roster. They don't need anything. Like they're literally drafting and signing out of luxury now for depth or for what-if scenarios. Philly's another team like that. Maybe San Francisco, you'd say that with the exception of their quarterback's situation not being great, even though when healthy, they probably feel a lot better about it then. There's not many teams who have built a roster like that. The Bills, the Eagles, the 49ers, those are probably three of the best in the league.
So now looking at these odds for the Bills for Super Bowl, conference, division, adding Leonard Floyd, does this change how you view the Bills, and how far they can go? Like you said, Brady, it goes through Kansas City. If you're looking at this plus 900 for the Super Bowl, plus 475 conference, and then of course minus 125 for the division.
Yeah, I mean, for me and Billy's our producer, he's a big Eagles fan, so I hate to say this, but look, I think whoever wins the AFC is going to win the Super Bowl. And so I wouldn't waste my time with taking a 475 bet at conference winner. I just go ahead and take the plus 900 bet, which I think is decent value for a team that was the favorite last year And maybe now that they don't have as much hype and people aren't talking about them quite as much, maybe they're in a better spot than where they were as far as the pressure and everything else they felt a year ago, or I should say pressure, maybe just even the lack of attention that they're getting and talk about that. So plus 900 to win the Super Bowl to me is the best bet. And then that's in part because even if they don't win their division, I think they're good enough to be able to go on the road with that defense and travel and win with Josh Allen. So even if, for example, like, and I don't even know what the Jets are at this point, but
20 maybe.
So I'm saying to win the division, but
no.
I would rather take the Bills to win the Super Bowl and then not lay money anywhere else. There's just not as much value in my mind in seeing how this whole thing could play out.
I'm just proud of myself for shaving 10 cents off the Bills price by constantly talking about the Bills at plus 135 to win the division. Now they're down to 125. Old 10 cent Brinson here doing a great job. Really market mover, ladies and gentlemen. Look, everybody knows I'm high on the Bills too. I think the Leonard Floyd thing only helps matters. Bills and Bengals here are the teams we're looking at on this screen for me are the best value. Clearly getting through the AFC is going to be tougher, but it's not going to be easy getting through the NFC playoffs once you get there. We haven't seen all the attrition that's going to happen, et cetera, et cetera. 750, 850 to win, when you're probably going to be a 150 dog in the actual Super Bowl. I would certainly prefer that if I was choosing.
Let's talk about another, since we're talking about futures right now, the Green Bay Packers, former Kings of the North, are now at the very bottom of their division in terms of the odds. But according to Romeo Dobbs, he doesn't see a big difference between Jordan Love and Aaron Rodgers. Brady, how much are you, obviously it's lip service, right? They got to say that. They're not going to be like, wow, things are really tough without Aaron Rodgers. But how much are you buying into this? And are the Packers actually a contender in the NFC North?
Yeah, I don't know about that. As far as buying into it, look, I think it's great to hear a wide receiver say this sort of thing. It gives you probably a lot more confidence. And Romeo Dobbs, even though he did play a fair amount last year as a rookie, he was probably getting a lot of reps with Jordan Love, being that number 2, and him probably getting a lot more one-on-ones, things like that with Jordan Love. So I'm sure they've got great chemistry and a good rapport with one another. But I just have a hard time feeling like you're going to get the same sort of production that you got from Aaron Rodgers.
MVP winner, yeah.
Yeah. But again, it's always good to hear. This is just a case of you got to kind of see it in order to feel like this is something that you can buy into, at least from me. And in part too, because I don't know that they can really rely yet on Jordan Love to carry them. And I think the Packers could with Aaron Rodgers, especially at end of game, scenarios. And I know people will challenge that. They'll use some different playoff performances or whatever they want to debunk that. But the reality is every single person who says that about Aaron Rodgers would be so happy if he was their starting quarterback. Yeah. And so it just kind of throws the argument out the window. But I think they're going to be more of a run-first offense. I think that's kind of what Matt LaFleur would like to be. And I think that honestly might help their defense from time to time. Maybe not facing as many snaps, not being on the field quite as long and shorting games.
Is that you, Mike McCarthy? What? I think this is also, we talk about the D. Milner stuff. It's one of the tropes too. Like, what is he supposed to say? Well, we're screwed. Like, he's just like, well, and let's not forget that Rodgers called out Romeo Dobbs at one point last year. So maybe he's perhaps more in tune to the idea of Jordan Love being there. But you can't, if you're Romeo Dobbs, you can't be like, well, obviously we lost Aaron Rodgers and now we're stuck with this jabroni. So we expect to win about 5 games this year. That's sort of what our expectations are. Like,
is some of it too just like putting that out there only because they did draft Jaden Reed in the 2nd round. They did draft Dontavian Wicks and Grant Dubose in the 5th and 7th round, respectively. Obviously, Christian Watson's there. I mean, they drafted a couple of tight ends.
Oh, you think he's like, no, I'm a big Jordan Love fan.
Like, remember, I'm your guy. Like, remember me. Like, things break down, you start running. Like, look over here, I'm your guy. Like,
he's like wearing like a Team Aaron t-shirt or Team Jordan t-shirt. Like,
I'm just saying, man, they spent a lot of draft capital on weapons for Jordan Love to throw to, and it's like, I don't know. He doesn't want to get caught up in the mix. So it's like, maybe I'll make some headlines and say some really flattering things about you.
All right, Bree, based on what you just said, I imagine that you're not firing on Jordan Love MVP at plus 5,000. However, Brinson, you get a little degenerate sometimes with some long shots here. How do we feel about Jordan Love for MVP?
Yeah, I'm gonna pass on Jordan Love for MVP. I think. I mean, look, it's what do we? I mean,
plus 5,000.
So 500 to 1 or 50 to 1? 50 to 1?
500.
No thanks. 50 to 1. No thank you. Like he's even with Kirk Cousins and Matt. I mean,
Kyler Murray.
I mean, I feel like plus 5,000 is
Stafford. You would.
I'm taking Stafford. I'm taking Stafford or Daniel Jones. Or even Kirk Cousins would never win it because like people like Pete Prisco vote. They would never vote for Kirk Cousins no matter what. Of the 50 to 1s that we have on the screen, I would say
is he going to be healthy in time? Like is he playing?
No. that was a Charlie Day special for you. I would rank them 1 Matthew Stafford, 2 Daniel Jones, 3 Kirk Cousins, 4 Jordan Love, 5 Kyler Murray. Although I mean, I guess Jordan Love could come out of nowhere and really surprise in this system. But they would need to, one, they have to win the division, which is, I guess, is entirely possible. And then 2, he's just going to have to be, like better than Aaron Rodgers, or not better than Aaron Rodgers was. Like you're talking about just the way that people perceive value. It would just be too tough. So I guess he would be in the mix of these like deeper guys I would throw on, but I'd have him above Kyler Murray, but I'm not really intrigued by that now.
Okay.
Are you intrigued by
150 to 1, I'd take it.
Okay. All right. Well, maybe who knows? The season is long. That might change a little bit later. When you look at Brinson, is there any Packers futures that you are interested in? Obviously the Super Bowl is 50 to 1. That's not going to be it. Conference is pretty tough. Division plus 500. I mean, you got the Bears, you got the Vikings. The Vikings won the most single possession games in all of football last year. So you've got to think that maybe their record's going to change a little bit. Chicago, a lot of promise, but we don't necessarily know. They were the worst team in the NFL last year. Could the Packers surprise people? And is that maybe a bet you would make on the division at plus 500?
Yeah, I'd be interested in that for sure. I think what's interesting about these division odds that you see here, right? So the Packers and the Bears have the exact same, and this speaks to what Brady was talking about with the AFC versus NFC, which we've been harping on this offseason. Packers and the Bears are both the same odds to win the Super Bowl, 50 to 1. Same odds to win the NFC, 22 to 1. The Packers are 5 to 1 to win the NFC North, and the Bears, are 3.5 to 1 to win the NFC North. That tells you that what that tells you is Vegas does not believe in either of these teams to do anything of meaning, but that they're not sure what's going to happen in this division. For my money, I would much rather have the Packers at 5 to 1 than the Bears at 3.5 to 1. I think we've seen some of Justin Fields, but we don't have a full idea of what he's going to be. The offensive line isn't very good. And, he's got Chase Claypool and DJ Moore now. Oh, everything's fine, I guess. The Packers have enough in the run game and a better defense. I think the Packers are a much better value, Brady, to win the division than the Bears with those odds.
I don't know. I'm kind of feeling a little more momentum right now with the Bears. Like they're building towards something. Either way, though, I wouldn't lay a bet on either of these teams.
I'm saying if I'm picking between the two.
I mean, I don't mean to call out, Caesars here, but my goodness, let's amp this up a little bit. Give me a little more incentive to lay down a bet on this thing.
50 to 1.
I'm just saying, you just said you wouldn't bet it unless it was 150 to 1.
No, I'm saying 50 to 1 is way too short. There's like the idea that look at these teams, scroll down, like the Bears and the Packers should be 100 to 1 plus to win the Super Bowl.
That's what I'm saying. It's like, you need to incentivize us if we're going to take some of these bets. And I get it. They run the business better than we do, but come on, throw us a bone here. Give us a little action here in June with some of these bets. You can't look at any of these and think any of them are attractive right now.
No.
I mean, look, like the idea that the Raiders are 45 to 1 to win the Super Bowl. Get out of town.
Tuesday night bar scene in the marina, which you're from the Bay Area. You know what I'm talking about, Katie. You've been there before. Pick your choice somewhere in Manhattan, wherever you want to pick, the meatpacking district, whatever. It's just, it's like you're going out, you're looking around. There's nothing attractive here, nothing to see here. I'm not going to lay a bet. I'm out.
As someone who is very familiar with San Francisco, that actually did really make me laugh. We are going to take a quick break here. You're watching Pick Six. We'll be right back.
Absolutely magisterial here.
Welcome back to the Pick Six podcast. Fellas, NFL is reportedly having difficulty finding a team willing to be on the next season of Hard Knocks. Breach actually wrote an article about the teams that are eligible to be on Hard Knocks, but that they don't want to be on Hard Knocks. You can check that out on cbssports.com. And I learned from Breach's article that there is a formula for the show, which I wasn't aware about. There is criteria. So you don't have to apply, right? If you have a first-year head coach.
It's really more like the NFL knows they have to compel somebody to do this because teams don't want to do it. They want to be. It's very invasive, and it's been done for so many years. So there's you can be excluded with the factors you're about to mention.
Yes.
Yeah. Hold on here, Katie. Let Will cut you off again and let him play the uncle role. He's going to tell you everything that you need to know and you should know. Okay. Go ahead, Uncle Will.
Yes.
I was simply trying to point out that it's a compelling situation, not these teams are not volunteering.
That's right.
But okay, so I will say you do not have to be involved, or you don't have to be, I don't know, I guess it's volunteering, but not. Okay, if you have a first-year head coach in place, if you had a playoff berth in the past 2 seasons, or you have appeared on Hard Knocks over the past 10 years, which leaves us 4 teams: the Jets, the Bears, the Saints, and the Commanders. Now go, Will.
Well, yeah. I mean, so anybody, for instance, the Patriots, they would love to just stick it to Belichick and make him be on there, but he made the playoffs in the last 2 years. The Broncos would be an interesting team, but they have a new coach in Sean Payton. So they could say, hey, we'd like to do it. Sean Payton's not going to do that more than likely, right? That's the thing. It's any team can say we'd like to do it, but you can't be asked by the NFL to do it. And if you meet any of those 3 criteria. So with that in mind, hey, congratulations, Jets. You're going to be on Hard Knocks because you have Aaron Rodgers this year and you have 6 primetime games and you don't have any reason to get out of doing Hard Knocks. And you can say, we don't want to do it. We don't want to do it. All you want, you're getting a goddamn snack.
Okay. You sound like Spelling.
Don't you remember the famous Rex Ryan Hard Knocks line?
Hamburger. I want French fries. You'll have nothing and like it. All right.
Caddyshack for the young people in the room.
God, what a great movie. Anyway, when I look at Hard Knocks, I kind of wonder how much longer it's going to exist.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There's so much access to players and teams, whether it's through their own kind of, I guess, digital staff, whether it's through other things that are kind of out there now, right? Doesn't Prime have a season follow?
In-season Hard Knocks? Yeah.
It kind of takes away then from the training camp element of it. And I also feel like for whatever reason, there's just less of an intrigue about the moment of cuts and who's going to make it and who's not. And I think the NFL has even gotten a little more sensitive about some of that, where they're not even showing as much of the emotion that comes along with it. And I think the other thing that becomes hard is I'll tell you the only time I guess I shouldn't say the only time, the first time, and it was one of the only times I ever got cut. I got a call. I wasn't even there. So I'm not even sure how that would have worked through Hard Knocks because we were already away. We had left. We had taken our break while they're, making the cuts and so forth. And I wasn't expecting to get a cut. So when I got the call, it was pretty surprising. But I'm not even sure how you produce good content out of that, because you don't get the in-office sit down, hey, we feel like you did a really great job, all that stuff. And the player's like, no, please don't. This is my dream. I got to hold on to this. And they're like, well, we just can't, maybe there's a chance we'll sign you back to the practice squad. And please don't let me go. And then you're trying to rip the playbook from him and he's holding on to the playbook and you go, you can't have it. It's mine, but whatever. And so you can kind of picture that dramatic scene. You don't really get that anymore, and hell, some of the times they'll probably just text them.
Are you sad that you missed your opportunity to be like, no, coach, that's my playbook?
No, honestly, getting released, it's a weird thing. At that point in time in my life, I was almost 30, and it was the first time I'd ever been fired before from any job.
Was it?
It was with Seattle Seahawks. It was with Pete Carroll and John Schneider. And I'll say this much about that whole experience. The prior year, we had a bad season in Kansas City. We had some tragic events take place. I was honestly in a terrible mental headspace about the game, about the NFL, all of that. And the irony, and this is maybe just a life lesson that I took from this, was one of the people that was an enemy, right? One of my biggest rivals. You could even say I probably hated.
Oh, Pete Carroll.
Pete Carroll.
Yeah.
And ironically enough, like from that time, seeing how he worked as a head coach with that culture and that environment in Seattle, it was special. And it opened up my eyes to why has been successful, was pretty much wherever he's been, because of how he's able to coach players and work with players and take guys aside who are maybe even fringe roster players and work on stuff. He was just such a motivating, positive influence that it really changed my perspective on the game of football and what it meant to be in the NFL. It was fun. Like, he made football fun again.
Wow.
Kind of moved past that. And honestly, that and just being around Russell. Like, I really enjoyed my time getting to know Russell, working with Russell, kind of pushing each other, competing, all that, talking ball, talking life. All that was awesome. And then our quarterback coach there, Tater Smith's the best. Tater, yeah, he's not there anymore, but him, Dave Canales, Dave, who's now the OC with the Bucks, they had such an awesome staff. Like, it was one of the most, I mean, Dan Quinn, our D coordinator that year, I sat down with him and he kind of broke down his defense. I'm like, hey, how do you attack empty? Take me through this. He set aside time to work with a guy who's going to be a backup quarterback at best to talk through how he went about attacking empties, like what his defensive philosophy was. Like, so they just had this really, really unique atmosphere and environment. And yet when I got the call, I was like stunned, because part of me was like, I've grown to get back to where I loved it so much, and now it's being taken away. But anyway, I don't even know how we got on this subject now. But
we were talking about Hard Knocks and cutting people, and you were detailing. Great. You did a great job describing your being cut. Yeah.
That moment, I don't think it would have been a great TV, because I was like so taken back by it that it took me a while. It was like leaving a relationship that you loved, and it didn't hit you right away. It hits like 3 days later when you're like, man, kind of.
Who called to cut you? I assume it was like the.
It was John and Pete. So I spoke to them both, but they also told me, they're like, hey, the Jets called, they're probably going to sign you. And I was like, I don't even know what to do. Like, is that like, I'd never been cut before. 7 years into it. I'm like, do I wait? Do I just take whatever offer is presented? Do I sleep on it? So I slept on it, ended up calling John Idzik back the following day, went in, signed with the Jets before the season started. So kind of knew what the scenario was there, but it makes for great TV sometimes, not always. And I think now that's one of the things that like Hard Knocks doesn't have in their back pocket. And especially because I think in season people are more intrigued by Hard Knocks more so than they are training camp, because training camps aren't what they used to be. Like, people love seeing the hitting. People love hearing like the pads crack. You don't get it as much. You don't have like the 2-a-days, 1-a-days, 2-a-days, 1-a-days, all the things you used to have. So it's just kind of a lesser version of what it used to be.
And I think too, you had a great point that there is. So like when NFL Films first started doing Hard Knocks and HBO, they started getting into it, and whoever the bodies that are putting it together is like, it's like, this is this insanely unique and fresh look for someone who's never played in the NFL, or football fans to be able to watch training camp. And now it's like, you get to see every throw in every training camp and really get the behind the scenes on so much stuff. And there's just so much media being put out by these teams and the network that it's almost like there's overexposure. I mean, I'll be honest, I don't watch every episode. Yeah, there's oversaturation. I don't watch every episode of Hard Knocks.
Yeah.
From a player's perspective, Brady, do players enjoy being on Hard Knocks? Is it something that they're like, oh no, our team is signed up for this? Or do they look at it as an opportunity? What is the...
I mean, I'll put it this way. So I was never on it. I know some guys who were. There's I'm not gonna name names, but I mean, I knew one guy who like used it to get information about whether or not he would get cut. He was able to befriend some of the behind the scenes folks there at HBO. So
awesome.
That helped give him some inside information and what was being edited out that not everyone was seeing. So some players like it for that reason. Some players like it because they can kind of build a following and a little bit of a brand out of it. Other guys don't, because there's actually like a low-key fine system. A lot of people don't know this, but in every room you're going to have a fine system you implement, unless you're just complete, jerks and, you just don't have fun. And you have various things that you put up for it. Trust me, if you're on Hard Knocks, there is a bajillion different types of fines that you can get.
Wow.
And it can get pretty pricey for you. And so some of the players probably wouldn't want to be on it just because they don't want to have to pay a lot of the fines that would come along with it.
So are you saying like saying like doofy stuff on like if you're like certain phrases you say, certain things you do? Not we're not talking like practice stuff.
Like let's say, for example, they're in a film room and you're watching it and the coach is like, "Hey, Will, why'd you do this?" And you're like, "Well, coach, I let's see, what are you playing? Linebacker. Okay. You're like, well, I saw kind of the guard at white knuckles and I knew he was going to end up, kind of pulling over to the left side. So then I kind of saw an opening. I filled right away, made the play. Good job, Will. Good job. That's a fine. Okay.
Because I'm like sucking up to the coach or whatever.
Yeah. Well, not to the coach, but like more yourself, and like,
I'm like, yeah. I saw this is exactly what I did, coach. I know what I'm doing. Yeah. Look great. I'm great.
Exactly. I'm not saying the exact phrase that I've heard people use for what that fine is, but it's a pretty hefty fine anytime you compliment yourself on national television or for everyone to see.
Does it start with a J?
Wait, they fine you for complimenting yourself on television?
Yes, Katie. I know this may be hard to understand, but it's all fun and games. It usually goes towards like an end of the year trip or party or something like that.
Okay.
But yes, it's a tough crowd, tough environment. All right. Like anytime that like you draw attention to yourself, a lot of fines come along with that too, in whatever way that may be. Anytime you throw, like if you're an offensive lineman, and let's say, for example, let's say someone jumped off sides, and they always blame the quarterback, all 5 of the offensive linemen. So like it's not if you happen to blame
you mean a false start? You mean a false start?
Yeah, false start.
You said jumped off sides, but
oh, sorry, false start. Well,
it's basic football terminology.
Right.
Glad you could educate.
Okay, then you finish the rest of the story. Well, tell me about the fine room in the NFL.
Okay, wait, what about in post?
You had that one with remember when you got in your fraternity? What you guys had to do to get in?
I was a linebacker. I saw white knuckles and I ran for a gap. Don't you remember?
No.
But so everyone. But in other words, if you're the offensive lineman and you like try to pin it on somebody else, you're getting fined, right?
Oh yeah, I mean that's probably one of the heaviest ones too. Yeah, you have to go along with the entire group. So,
what was the best quarterback room fine you ever saw?
Yes. Biggest fine you had?
Biggest fine I had, I don't know. I usually didn't get fined too often. Like if you just try to stay quiet, add value when you can, and not really say much in the quarterback room. It all depends. Like it depends on like who's the older veteran and how they operate. Gosh, we used to. I mean, quarterbacks is not like you don't have a ton of fines because usually you get fined by like the offensive line or the tight ends or the wide receivers because you'll go in their room for something and then you don't know what their fine system is, then you get fined for something. we have like on Fridays you'd play like some sort of football golf. So you'd go like throw at different targets, or you'd have like a punt and then you'd get a throw to be able to get to a target. You had to obviously use them however you'd use them. Or we create like a golf course out of it. So you do that and you play for like a box of Pro V1s or something like that once a week. So it's all fun. It just depends.
Sounds like a frat.
Yeah, the difference is the initiation to become part of it isn't quite the same. Well, yeah. You don't have to really get down and dirty with your other frat brothers, if you know what I mean. I know you know what I mean.
I don't know what you mean. I don't know what you mean. Look at the time.
I want to be on the receiving end of a Brinson Hayes.
No, you would not. I'm a pretty mean, pretty nice person.
Yeah, pretty nice person. All right. Well, that is going to do it for our show today. Thank you for rocking with us. Make sure you join us on Thursday for more off-season coverage. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe on the YouTube page. If you're listening to audio only, download, follow, leave a 5-star review, and we'll see you next time.